Welcome back, everyone. I hope you're all suitably refreshed and if you've absorbed all the information that you heard earlier. I hope so. We need to do everything in bite size so it can be fully absorbed because a lot of people actually leave a lot of these conferences not remembering much. So I'm hoping that you're retaining the information that we give you here today. Well, so far, as we mentioned, we've heard from prominent women in global leadership positions and also from the C-suite level as well about some of the challenges and some of the opportunities that they've had throughout their careers and some essential advice there for other women going forward. Now, we move on to, however, the entrepreneur. We need to hear the entrepreneur's voice. As men and women business owners, they face very, very different types of constraints and biases. This is business owners, SMEs, and entrepreneurs. Now, they face these biases just because they're women, and they're deemed more high risk. Can you believe it? Women apparently are more high risk than men when it comes to funding SMEs and different entrepreneurs, female entrepreneurs. Well, to talk a little bit more about this, and I've got three incredible entrepreneurs here, female entrepreneurs, who are joining me here on stage to talk about the successes and some of maybe their failures as well, I'm not sure. But let's get them up on stage. A very warm welcome to Anouka Dhadda. She is the co-founder and CEO of Zeroism, and she's also the former advisor to the Prime Minister of the UK. She's here with us today. A very warm welcome. Come on up. Lovely to have you here, Anouka. Now, I do know that we don't have much time with you, so we're going to get to it straight away. A very warm welcome as well to Darshita Gillies. She's the founder and CEO of Maanch. A very warm welcome. Lovely to have you here. Now, we are, in fact, waiting on another guest, and I'm hoping she's going to join us in due course. That's Zada. She's the co-founder and CEO of Dhadda Venture Builder. She's also named in the Forbes list under 30 under 30, and I'm hoping she's going to join us in just a little moment. Right, in the meantime, Anouka, I know we don't have much time with you. You've got to dash off, sadly. I think you're back to the UK soon, aren't you? Right, let's start off with the question, why are women entrepreneurs deemed and seen as more high risk than men? It just seems totally ridiculous.
I mean, we're biased, aren't we? But we shouldn't be. Look, I think there's probably two kind of systemic things which I've found in my experience so far. And just to kind of caveat, I didn't ever think I'd be an entrepreneur. I spent nearly 15 years in the UK government and was just like, oh, nice, safe, steady income, that's lovely. But, you know, actually in breaking out, I've really enjoyed the ability to shape and set my own agenda and really hold those values kind of that I hold dear. But I think kind of the two issues that we tend to see is one that's socioeconomic, right, which is actually caring responsibilities, etc. That tends to be viewed as a bit of a risk because actually can you work all hours if you also have to go and collect your kids from school, etc. And then the second that I personally have found quite difficult is the language, so kind of more of the cultural and language bit, which is I was told I was incredibly brave for starting up my own business. And it's just bothered me because that makes it sound like it's an unusual thing to do or a not very wise thing to do. And you know, my life partner is actually also an entrepreneur, but as a man, no one says, oh, he's very brave. They just say, oh, good on you. So I think there's kind of a mix of things there, which is more engendered in the way we talk about this, but also kind of in the way we structure our society.
Completely. Why do you think women are deemed more high risk, Darshita? What is the misconception around that, do you think?
Yeah, I think I come from a very different perspective. I was born and raised in Mumbai, and in a very conservative family. I was fortunate to have parents who invested in my education, but the secondary sort of messaging always was, it's a backup plan. You're going to be a homemaker. And I think a lot of us are just subtly conditioned that we are homemakers and taking care of the home is our primary responsibility. And I think that stops a lot of women from taking up opportunities and risks that actually I think the world needs now. When I talk about the business I set up, Maanch means platform in Hindi. I always start to say that I'm not I'm not starting a business of selling potatoes on a street. When we sell potatoes, we know they are like a common product. You create a demand. I think women think differently about the world. When I grew up in Mumbai, I was in a very humble home. I thought, this is my family. How do I empower us as a family and get us out from the poverty and the helplessness that we find ourselves in? As I've grown, I think the world is my home, and as a home we have so many challenges. We need to build so many solutions, and I think women have it in them to actually want to build solutions that make things work for all of us. And I think that's what business is in the end about. It's about adding value, creating value for society. And I think when we think about going to a salon, the end destination, then I think my common companion would be a woman. I'd ask, Anouka, hey, you want to join me? I think when it comes to investing in women and starting a business, I think when investors are thinking about investing or backing, I think their common thinking is, they don't perceive women as someone, hey, I'll give you some money, let's go and build this business together. So I think there are like lots of layers that need to be looked at and examined, and it's as much as women stepping up and equally and importantly so investors backing women more proactively.
Anouka, I know you've got to rush off, so last question really for you. How do we break down these stereotypes when it comes to women's abilities around entrepreneurship? And also, where does change need to start? And how do we also sort of change the mindset when it comes to these investors?
So interestingly, in my kind of, if you were asking me for policy advice, as it were, I'm always very like, this technology will change everything, it's fine, we'll just innovate. But actually, in this particular kind of instance, I think it's very much like we all have it within ourselves to change this. So there's a lot that's said about role modelling. So I heard the kind of earlier speaker talking about the kind of bit in the middle that's missing. And quite often, if you don't see someone that looks like yourself, then you're kind of deterred from really going for it. And just you mentioned that my previous job, so my previous life before I took this plunge, was to be the advisor to Boris Johnson and Theresa May. And I actually nearly didn't go for that job because I was very worried that I wouldn't get it, but also I didn't look like anyone there, and just all those things. So actually, it's a kind of like a smaller risk because I knew I was getting paid, whereas taking your own journey in a startup means totally the opposite. But it is that thing where I was like, oh, there will be all these men that will apply. And I think, how did I overcome that? Well, it was just by saying, well, you don't get anywhere if you don't go for it, you don't know. So I think it's kind of overcoming that uncomfortableness. And then the final point I would just make is actually networks are the thing that also really helps you get over the line. So actually, I think, and this is why IGF is great, within this, we've built a real network over, be it today or the last few days. And those kind of series of champions are the people that can give you support, give you contacts, just even give you a pep talk sometimes when you're like, I just don't know. So I think kind of, creating the kind of female cartel to try and take over would be the kind of solution for me.
And what about changing mindsets when it comes to investors as well? How do we shift that mindset?
Quite often it's in the evidence, right? So actually, hopefully when we get joined by the mystery chair, actually there's some really interesting work that's going on that also shows that companies where women start them up. So yes, you're less likely to kind of A, start up a company, B, get investment for said company. But actually, once you do create them, they tend to be incredibly successful because, to go to Darshita's point, actually we think about things in a slightly different reason. So maybe to come full circle and say, well, why don't we tend to go for this, or why are women viewed as riskier? Maybe it's because they know we're going to take over.
Yeah, there you go. Very well said. I'm going to leave you to it then. I think you've got to rush off, but we cannot thank you enough for coming in and being with us here today and putting your voice here today. It's been brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. In the meantime, I'm going to get close so we can have a proper chat, a nice fireside chat with you. But yes, let's continue on, obviously, with our conversation. What are your thoughts in terms of breaking those stereotypes and also changing investor mindset? What sort of roadblocks have you had along the way?
I like the earlier suggestion. I think it was about procuring talent, but the blind auditioning we've seen that in orchestra. I think we are starting to see this in the UK, where when HR is looking at jobs, they screen out the names, and so there's less gender bias. I think it would be an interesting experiment to see pitch decks without the founders, because in the end it's the business idea and the team. If we take the team out, assume that all teams that are presented have capability to deliver the business idea. Let's do an experiment to see how many women get bagged. I have, obviously, I started the company as a bold mission to lay down the data infrastructure. Every money that we give, we spend, we invest, has impact on people and planet. We are not capturing that data. We've started to make ESG a big machinery, but we don't actually see the value of having that data can inform us to make impact inclusive decisions and lead to a very different future. To set a bold ambition and then to start a business quite young and then meet with COVID has been an interesting challenge, I must say. It's very hard, firstly, to fundraise, but secondly, to fundraise, build trust on a Zoom call with someone you've never met, and then as a woman, and then as a tech founder. It's all the no's. Generally, also, I think we've seen from evidence that businesses that have co-founders get more money than if you're a solo founder. And then you add a female solo founder, it becomes equally challenging.
It's interesting, very interesting. And as you said, to have a co-founder is going to win you that money if you pitch, right? Tell us a little bit more about mentorship. As an entrepreneur, do you have a mentor? Did any sort of men and women out there influence you at all?
100%. I say my daughter is my inspiration, and so is my husband. I think I would not be here had he not invested in me as a woman. And it takes a lot of courage to actually consciously step back and allow the woman to lead in a relationship, but also in business. Our daughter, she's 13, and I remember during COVID, she said, and I was frustrated and I was crying because it was like, why is it so hard? And she said, Mom, why is it so hard to destroy the world? Why is it so easy to raise money to destroy the world, and why is it so hard to save it? And for me, this has become a personal mission. I want to show to young women that you can make money by actually adding value to society, to build businesses that are pro-people and pro-planet and not built on exploitation of labor and or business models that extract from the earth without giving back. Time will tell, but for me, that's the spirit that wakes me up each day and makes me go for it each day.
And that seems to be the way of the world at the moment, especially after the pandemic. People really have changed their mindsets and the directions that they want to go in now as well, which brings me back to investing as well. What are investors looking for at the moment, especially within maybe women investors? Is there anything that they're looking at in particular, do you think?
I think definitely when it comes to sustainability, ESG, we are seeing a lot more women entrepreneurs stepping up to the game. But equally, our work is working with investors. We see that most investors are not going to divest from their existing portfolios. So the best way in which they can have an impact, investors can have an impact, is by actually engaging with their portfolio companies and encouraging them to have more diverse talent, encouraging them to look at more robust business models. But it's definitely not an easy task. Regulation and policies definitely help. I think the mystery chairperson is missing here, but one of the things we heard from her this morning from Zada, is when they invest, and if the founding team doesn't have female representation, they actually don't fund the business. And they say, bring a female founder and then we'll have a look at your business. So having policies that counteract these sort of big gaps that exist in making the jump to play at par with other businesses is equally important.
Have you been quite lucky in terms of setting up your business? Has it been quite an easy process as a woman? And what sort of challenges have you had along the way?
I think I personally, I think we're speaking about being a woman, but I've never seen myself as a woman. I've always looked, okay, I need to start a business. How do we set that up? UK has a very good system in place to help set up businesses. Although, sort of there is a lot that can be done to improvise and speed up our journeys as well. I think I was really impressed by the ecosystem here. One of the primary reasons I'm here is how do we grow and how do we expand? We've learned so much from the global north in terms of how investing is done. How do I bring that intel and insight and catalyze the opportunities in this region? And it's fantastic to see the opportunities that are being created here, including for female founders. And actually, one last word for India Global Forum. Manoj mentioned this morning, he had the list of 100 women in UK-India relations. I was one of them. And we also won the Startup of the Year award in 2019. And I think it's very important to highlight so much of growth depends on being acknowledged, being given a seat at the table, given a seat at the stage, because that's when not just the work that I do, but also how I think can become a shared, sort of adds to the collective narrative of how we need to shift things.
Now, as we've got a bit of extra time, I thought I'd throw out to our audience. Let's make this a little bit interactive, shall we? Does anyone have a question for our guest here while we have a little bit of time? Anything on entrepreneurship? Yes, we have a lovely lady at the back there, in the middle, sorry. If we have a microphone handy, do we?
If I'm audible enough, I can...
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe you can just shout. There we go.
I'm Priya. I'm from Startup Catalyst. I help founders raise funds.
We have a microphone for you. There you go.
I funded a few of the startups. So my question to you is, what has been more challenging, raising funds or building a business, being a woman entrepreneur?
Good question.
All of it. I think the challenge is, if there was funding available, I'd be able to spend more time on the business. And to be able to spend more time on the business, I need to raise money. So it's almost like a little sort of a vicious circle, which hopefully becomes a virtuous circle very soon. I think there are tips for, sort of knowing who you want as your investor is so crucial. I feel like if I knew that, I would have spent so much less time trying to cajole investors who I knew would never invest in the first place. So knowing where you are as a business and who is the right growth partner, and only spending time in finding and meeting and building relationships, I think being strategic is very important.
Good question. Thank you. We have one of our former panelists from earlier. Please do throw the microphone over and ask away.
Yeah, thank you. I have an interesting question. You said you were inspired by your daughter, and I think you related to you have to start young. What would your advice be to someone like me? I mean, I would not be telling my age on this stage, but so my daughter inspires me now. He said, you have done enough for the corporate and I have an idea for you. Please become an entrepreneur. Can I do it?
I would say 100%. I would say don't be deceived by how I look. Sometimes me and my daughter go and people say, ask her which year are you going to school, and then they turn to me and I say I'm her mom. So I would say I did start late. I could have definitely started earlier. But I think in the end, age is not a restriction to being an entrepreneur. It's a different lifestyle. On the one hand, yes, you're your own boss. On the second hand, you're responsible for everything. And it's not everyone's cup of tea. I didn't even think it was my cup of tea. My first year was, I'm going to try this out. But the intensity of it can sometimes be quite gripping. for anyone who's aspiring to be an entrepreneur from a corporate background, I would say one thing is, what is your personal relationship with fear and uncertainty? And if you feel that it is an inspiring space to be, and it actually compels you to go beyond that, entrepreneurship is absolutely the right thing. Because being an entrepreneur, you will be challenged to the absolute fear that you have, to the absolute sort of being able to drive uncertainty in the face of so many variables is something that, sort of, if you get used to it, it's no time is a good time.
That's a great advice and brilliant question. Thank you. Yeah, because being an entrepreneur, it's a 24-hour job. My husband's an entrepreneur, and it's just continuous conversations, meetings, phone calls, because you're on call 24 hours a day, aren't you? Because it's your baby and you want it to grow and be successful. Any more questions from our audience at all? Any further questions? Oh, yes, we have a lady just here.
Actually, as you said, we are
We have a microphone here for you.
To give a little background, we are 4 sisters. I'm the youngest. So we're all proud of our parents. They give us a platform to where we are now. I've got 2 daughters of my own. So for me, the question for you is, as an entrepreneur, when you started, what was your thinking? Because I'm keeping my first step as an entrepreneur in the field of art. So how does that connect where you are right now? Can you just help me out to further put my step further out and become the one you are sitting there? Because next time when I see, I want to be there, not here.
Thank you. My first experience speaking on the stage was in front of 1,800 students, and I was such a shy person. My legs were shaking, and I don't know why I even put myself in the situation. And I think a lot of times it's just making a personal promise to yourself that that's what I want, and then having the ecosystem or the family system or the colleagues to help you and hold you accountable to move in that direction. And that is so important. Many times I think, oh, I don't want to do that. But then I think, the part of me that then nudges me to end up doing it is, I think, how will my daughter look at me? How will this inspire not just my daughter, but so many daughters, so many young women? I come from a scheduled caste family in India, and I think, jumping caste, jumping layers of society, I never even dreamt I could buy a ticket from Mumbai to Lucknow. To imagine that I would one day live in London was like a fairy tale. So I think sometimes there are like little things we have to do just to push ourselves to that next, and I personally do believe if our intention is pure and we hold ourselves to keep on that path, we will find our way through.
I can take one last question. Yes, gentleman at the back.
Thank you very much. This isn't so much a question, just a statistic to give us a sense of just how real this is. Of the 100% of total capital invested in venture-backed startups in the USA in 2021, only 2% of those went to companies founded solely by women. 2 out of 100% in the USA.
Wow.
In the UK as well.
In the UK as well. Another shocking statistic there. And at the end of the day, the data and the statistics speak for themselves. We don't actually need to do any other sort of investigation into it. The figures speak for themselves at the end of the day. Tell us a little bit more about, actually, do we have any other further questions? I'm going to give our audience a little bit more of a voice. Yes, one last question, and then I think we'll wrap up after this.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you for the session so far. It's been wonderful. My name is Shawnee, and the question that I have, or rather, I'm kind of stuck in an N+1 syndrome. And how do you leave your cushy corporate job and take that plunge? Because it's not sustainable. You don't know whether you're going to get the investments, and certainly can't be a side thing, right? It has to be your main focus. How did you take it, and what will be your advice for us people who are thinking of doing it, but it's like, yeah, let's do it next year, maybe on in again, N+1 and so on.
Yeah. I'll tell you my story. I'm also from a corporate background. Started as a chartered accountant, worked with Standard Chartered. For me personally, the lever was, I'm one of those few people who said banking didn't take away my soul. I enjoyed every day I went to work. I loved the culture. I loved the work. I loved everything that was there. For me, it was more, I think like I mentioned, coming from a poor family, my goal at that time was, how do I get rich? How do I get rich fast? And banking was the way, and you know, sort of pursuing and performing in that space. But then once I had, you know, sort of the house, the car, the maid, then the question was, but is this how we define success? And what is a bigger definition of success I can embrace for myself? And that then led me to a very different path than sort of being in the bank and still continuing to grow up the rungs. The last one is I was working as a consultant, working with governments, business, non-profits, and tri-sector partnerships. And I realized as a consultant, I had limitations to how my work was having an impact. I made these amazing ideas. I drew out detailed roadmaps of how we can lead the world to sustainability. And I felt my ideas weren't getting through beyond just that pitch deck and the presentation. And so I think what I'm trying to say is the inherent sort of drive to see a certain outcome in the world is something that, you know, if you can find that self in you, that's when you know entrepreneurship is the right way and the medium, because that's what's going to keep you up through the night. And then final one, I would say in one sentence is, for me, life has never been about living from the circumstance I've been. Life has always been about, what is my vision, and then how do I make it happen? How do I gather the support and resources I need to help achieve that? And it's marvelous. On the days where you feel there's nothing, suddenly mirrors of hope and resources just come into the bank account, into the team, and it all works out in the end.
Very well said. Thank you so much. Now, sadly, we have run out of time, but it's been fascinating hearing your story. Thank you so much for such incredible advice here today. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you.
Yeah. Bye. Thank you, everyone.